Alright, you guys know how a tier list video works, so let's get right into it. In case you're wondering, I don't really have any specific requirements. It's more of a mishmash of everything about the monster, like their design, their fight, their gear. It's just a for fun video, come on. No need to really think too deeply about this topic. Oh, and also, despite including Zoshia, I will not include title update monsters like Mizutsune, because technically speaking, Zoshia is in the base game. Plus, I just kind of want to see what they bring with all the title updates and maybe do another video like this in the future. Although if you do disagree with any of my placements today, feel free to tell me in the comments why. Starting off with Shatakabra, who goes right in the middle in the A tier. I do like Shatakabra, and I specifically enjoyed the fact that he isn't just another raptor right off the bat like we got with Great Izuchi and Rise. He is more unique, and I know that he leans a little bit more towards the goofy cute side of things, which isn't exactly my vibe. When I think about my favorite first monsters in a Monster Hunter game, I think of stuff like the Great Macau, and I also think about the Great Jagras. Like when I saw Great Jagras just swallow an entire small monster whole, I was a little bit more impressed. Next up is the Fire who goes one tier above Shatakabra because I really like Chemitris. He feels like a discounted Glavenus for beginners, you know, with the tail swiping on the ground and creating fire sparks. I know this contradicts what I said about Shatakabra because I'm not really into the cutesy goofy monsters, but this is just funny. It's a giant chicken. Plus, his gear just looks so good. Like, I'm sorry, sir, but I don't remember beginner monsters having the right to have so much drip. He has these little pecking attacks to resemble the whole chicken thing, and like I said, the tail swipe on the ground to create fire. It can actually set the grass in the Windward Plains on fire, which I think is a really cool detail. But as much as I like Chemitris, I think that the next monster one-ups him in every single category. Of course, I am talking about none other than Lalabarina. I think it's such a shame that this is such an early game monster, so she has to be easy because I love this monster through and through. For starters, the fact that her butt turns into a flower and it still has a paralysis stinger in there is so cool. It's just such a creative way to create a monster, like not a fantasy creature, right? Like feels more like a real animal. Because after all, there are plenty of insects in real life that mimic like foliage and fauna in general to either have camouflage or to lure and prey. And her name kind of translating to a ballerina also shows in her fight because she dances and twirls around you and then she strikes with the stinger or just goes with the claws so precisely. The way that she fights and the resemblance to a ballerina reminds me of why I like my favorite monster so much, which is Primordial Malzeno, because he fights like a knight, but instead, Lalabarina fights as a ballerina. And plus, her gear looks beautiful. Both the armor and the weapons are just S tier. Although some are better than others, like the Greatsword and the Gunlance for Lalabarina are kind of just like a reskin of the Hope weapons. But I'm not gonna complain too much because that is miles better than the slap-on designs we had in World, right guys? Next up, I know the veterans are not gonna be happy with me, but I'm putting Congalala down in B tier. I have fought him in old gen games and I just never really thought he was all that. I think his design is funny and kind of cute, like he's a giant pink monkey, but like I've established with Shatakabra, that's not really my vibe. Oh, but Ark, you gave Chemitris a pass. I know, but you know, Chemitris goes so I have to love him. Also, is it just me or does he not pick up mushrooms as often? I mean, it could be the fact that, you know, the wound in the focus system makes killing monsters like very much faster than we used to before. But the truth is that he's never really done it for me. I've never really liked him too much, not his gear, not his fight, not his design. I think he's alright, but that's about as far as I'll go. But don't worry guys, because he's getting a companion in B tier with Balahara. I'm not doing this because Balahara starts with a B, but rather because I think his fight should have been something more special. I really do enjoy the fact that he explores leviathans outside of water, turning, you know, the sand almost into his ocean. But I think the coolest thing about Balahara is that he hunts in a pack, right? When you see the, like, turf orb with him and the Doshaguma, you see that there's like 2 or 3 that lunge at the Doshaguma. And even the sand pits that he creates if you're hunting other monsters, like they can drag monsters in and sometimes even pull monsters down into its lair, which was a feature that I really liked, but at the same time, I just don't know. His fight just doesn't feel very memorable. And although I really liked his design at first, later on I started looking at the smaller monsters and thinking, maybe this guy should have been a small monster? I don't know, it's just that when I look at other designs like Chemitris and Lalabarina, even if he is a beginner monster, I still think that he's a little bit too simplistic for my taste. Although I will say he has some killer armor and weapons, they look amazing. Next up is Doshaguma, which I will put a little bit above Balahara just because I like the fight more. Again, the monster is very simplistic, and I think his role in Wilds is to really test new players and see if they're getting along well with their combat skills. The reason I mainly think this is because he has that undercut move that he follows up after the big slam, which I think catches a lot of people off guard. And that thing can do enough damage to cart you, so if you're not paying attention, I think he's gonna wake you up. I do like the almost Mad Max Knight look that we get with their armor because, you know, I use his waist on my layered set a lot because I just love it so much. And although I do like his fight, I feel like he is missing some sort of gimmick, but I think he's just all muscle, which there's nothing incoherently wrong with it. I mean, Nergigante is a lot of muscle in the fight, you know, a lot of physical attacks, and then he occasionally uses the spikes, but I think the spikes are like the icing on the cake, you know, that's what makes the fight so good. And with Doshaguma, it's not really that, it's mostly smack after smack. I don't know, maybe if he had a variant where he used an element of swords and had maybe some AoEs or something like that, maybe then he would be a bit higher. The Harsh Judgment train continues with Ufduna because I just don't think that she measures up to her fellow Apex monsters. In fact, I almost like watching Ufduna swim more than I like fighting the monster. One of my friends called Isaac, he actually made a remark that really summarized how I feel about this fight, which is, it feels like the greatest Jagras, but he's just wet. Although I think the gear is pretty, is not really my style, like I don't really go for the tribal warrior type. I think if Ufduna managed to use the water element a bit more, not just with the veil, because the veil does look really cool, but once you strip the veil, it almost feels like, yeah, it's just a big great Jagras that likes to flop around. And again, I think her fellow Apex monsters just leave her in the dust. Next up is Rompopolo, who I will place at the top of the A tier, because although he is cooler, in my opinion at least, to Doshaguma and Ufduna, he is still not all that. It almost feels like he is the Dodogama of Wilds. Like, yeah, we like him and we think he's cute, and when he's all deflated, he looks really sad, but other than that, is there really much else going for this guy? The way he uses the environment is interesting by, you know, injecting gas into the ground and making these explosions. But when I saw him in the trailer, he just looked so horrifying, so menacing, and to see how small and kind of harmless he is, it just doesn't rub me the right way. I just think he would be so much cooler if he was a later game monster where his role was less introductory to the oil well basin and more just kind of like below or on par with an Apex Predator. Alas, I feel like my boy gets bullied by everyone, especially at Jarokan. He does not seem to like Rompy at all. And maybe if you had a bit more confidence, if he was bigger, he'd grab that stinger and just stab a Jarokan and make him implode. But up next is something very special because Ray Dao goes straight to S+. Everything about this guy slaps. His fight, his design, his armor, his sound design. It is incredible that they've managed to make a flying wyvern stick out so much. Because usually, and actually historically speaking, that is the skeleton that he's used the most throughout the Moss Hunter series. Oh, and just his roar, the way he sounds, the way he turns himself into a railgun, like bro is a taser and he's unapologetic about it. And the way he interacts with the map is even cool. Like when he shoots his lightning at the ground, it creates a glass rock that you can use to do a mount attack. And I also really appreciate how lightning isn't the only thing he does, because he has those huge wing talons that he slams into the ground after doing a backflip and whatnot. And fun fact, did you know that when the Moss Hunter team saw Ray Dao, they also thought that Ray Dao was going to be the flagship of Wilds? The only gripe I have with Ray Dao is that I wish he had cooler helmets, because they're just like 2 horns or 1 horn, and I think it's such a wasted potential. It could have been so much better. Then we got Nerscylla, who I'm going to put into S rank because Nerscylla was actually one of the 2 monsters that I wanted to see back in Wilds. I do think she suffers a little bit with trying to keep up with, you know, the focus mode and the wound system, but they managed to make her fight even creepier. Like seeing her jaws unhinge in this game just feels so cool. I do wish that they would have given her a little bit of a better treatment instead of bringing like the base form. Maybe Shrouded Nerscylla would have been a bit cooler, but I've just always loved Nerscylla, you know, the way that she wears the skin of her prey to camouflage and armor herself up. Her turf war with Gypsaros where she just wraps him up like a burrito and puts him in the fridge for later. And then the icing of the cake is the creepy little babies that she has crawling after you all the time, even though they, you know, don't really pose any threats. Like maybe you could have taken a page out of Ragnar Kadaki's book and put them to use a little bit more, Nerscylla. But yeah, I just love her so much. Ever since I first met her in GU, she's just taken over my heart. She's such a cool, creepy spider, and I just love her for it. The Hirobami is an interesting monster for me because he is making into S tier, but barely so. Most of this is actually attributed to just how unique the design is. I mean, he is like a cobra flying snake insect centipede thing, and I understand that perhaps the smaller size of the monster is justified by the fact that it needs to be lighter so that it can float with the wind currents, but I don't know, I feel like he's too small. Kind of like I said with Rompopolo, I think this guy is lacking confidence because he can't measure up literally to the other monsters in the area. Although I do understand that this also might be because of the fact that he is primarily a pack monster, so he's not necessarily meant to be fought alone. But yeah, I think the fight is okay. body, and the armor design is not for me, but that's fine. The design of the monster is what carries him over to S rank, because the fight itself and the gear, not quite there, but the way that he looks is really cool. But where Hirobami sits in the bottom of the S tier, a Jarrakan sits at the top of it. This might be surprising for the people who have been around the channel for a while, because you guys might know that I'm not a big fan of the monkeys. But how can I love a Jarrakan when he spins around like a Beyblade only to crash into the ground like a comet? Like, this guy is a fellow Valstrax fan, there's no doubt. In fact, when I first saw him, his design looked like something straight out of Wild Hearts. I don't know if you guys remember that game or not, but it was mainly inspired by yokai as well, kind of like what Rise did. And I think Jarrakan really does match that aesthetic, but he is so at home at Wilds, it's just crazy. And even though his fight knot might be the hardest thing out there, just the spectacle side of it alone is really cool. There's even smaller design choices in the fight, like how he uses his tail as a club, and it's just that attention to detail that I really appreciate. And it's weird to see how his weapons are so awesome, but the armor just really doesn't do it for me. And maybe it is exactly because the weapons are just so well designed that the armor has a lot to live up to when it kind of struggles to meet that standard. Good job on a Jarrakan for setting a really high standard for whatever next monkey we get as a brand new monster. Time to climb all the way up the ladder to S+, because New Udra slaps. Literally. Man, what a cool monster. Just seeing a cephalopod that is an apex predator that can exist within a map, not like, you know, Nakarkos that needs his own map, even though I love Nakarkos, don't get me wrong. He just feels so natural, and the way that they really implemented the octopus design into the fight and into just the way it looks, it's just so beautiful. The way it sets itself on fire, the way it just like grabs you and opens up, I don't know what to call it, a valve, I guess, to just shower you with fire is so cool. I really like the big slams it does on the ground as well. It just makes itself look so massive, and that move does do quite a bit of damage, so you gotta learn how to counter that. Just a really solid fight, and bonus points for making him look kind of pathetic when you cut off all the tentacles. Bro, even the way this thing moves around the map is funny. Like, it squeezes itself into the cracks of the oil well basin to go wherever it wants to go. And unlike a Jarrakan, I like the armor more than I like the weapons, because some of the weapons look a little bit sus. But just what this monster does in terms of a standard, it sets this brand new skeleton type that we just loved, and I just can't get over it, man. It's just so amazing. What an incredible addition New Udra is. I love this guy. Now let's go down one tier, because although Guardian Doshaguma fixes my problems with regular Doshaguma, it still doesn't quite live up to the apexes. It has the very important job of introducing the Guardian concept. Like, the second I saw this guy, I was just so puzzled. Why does he look the way he does? Is this some sort of frenzy mutation? What's going on? The Wilk attacks just add to the missing pieces that I had with the base Doshaguma. I think it's just an improvement in every way, shape, or form. And I'm not going to dwell too much on it, because the rest of it kind of applies to what I said about base Doshaguma. But yeah, he does a really important job lore-wise, and he really did spike my interest in the game. And then we got a guy that did the same thing, but even better, which is Guardian Rathalos. I'm just gonna say this right now, I think Rathalos is one of the best mascots for a franchise ever, end of. Keeping in mind that Silver Rathalos is one of my favorite monsters, I typically tend to have quite a high standard for Rathalos variants and subspecies. Especially when Azure Rathalos drags the reputation of this monster all the way down to the ground. Guardian Rathalos feels really nice, and it gives him more reason to be on the ground, or to, you know, smack onto the ground and create bigger AoEs, which makes him ultimately a bigger threat. It is just nice to see a Rathalos that can rely on something other than, you know, the standard fire attacks, and he can use his claws for something other than just poison. And I also think that the Guardian Rathalos weapons and armor made just enough changes to make the weapons look different and feel different, while not changing too much of the base design that we all like. Guardian Arkveld is a tough one though, because I think he's going to the bottom of the S tier right besides Hirobami, because I do like him, but calling him its own monster feels a little bit cheeky to me. I appreciate the fact that the monster feels like it doesn't understand where it fits into this role, so it just kills everything it sees in hopes of becoming better. But at the same time, I just struggled to understand how he is its own monster, because in comparison to the other Guardian monsters, I feel like he doesn't have enough to differentiate him from the base version. I will address him in greater detail when I talk about the full monster, you know, in high rank, but for now, let's just put him at the bottom of S tier. But next up is something very exciting, because Jindahad climbs all the way up to the top, because this monster fucks. God damn, everything about him is cool. The fight, the unique arena, the gear, oh man, he is just so amazing. And even his position in the story, like he is this guardian that is preventing people from traveling over to Suja village. He's just sitting there like, oh, what's that? You want to cross my home? Bitch, you thought, come over here. There's something so majestical about a simplistic design that still stands out with his metallic armor and just the sheer size of this monster. He just has so much presence. Plus, the nuke got me the first time I played the game, you know? I didn't think to just bring down the rock and stay behind it. I was just kind of sat there like, maybe this is a DPS check. I wish that he would use the terrain a little bit more often rather than just climbing those pillars and essentially becoming a free window for damage. But man, I ain't got nothing to complain other than that. He is so cool, and even his gear is just mwah. Then we got the new king of S rank, which is Guardian Ebony Odogaron. I remember playing Base World and being super mesmerized with Odogaron's concept and fight. I thought he was just amazing. Then Ebony came along in Iceborne, and I just thought to myself, they did it. They improved the monster. This wasn't one of those subspecies or variants, unlike Shrieking Legiana, that did the exact opposite of giving the monster a better rep. And the fact that this Ebony Odogaron in particular is meant to serve as a literal guardian to stop people from going into the Dragon Torch is very cool. Like the fact that there's a lore reason as to why Ebony Odogaron in specific was chosen to guard that entrance is awesome. And just how I think Guardian Doshaguma is important for introducing the concept of guardians, Guardian Ebony Odogaron actually fixes a problem that is long-standing within the Monster Hunter series, which is how to make returning monsters more interesting. Sometimes it feels like a base monster will return in a Monster Hunter game only for it to try and get a cool variant later on, but Guardian Ebony just shows us that no, this isn't necessary. You can just bring a variant that people liked more, or a subspecies rather, I'm not too sure which one Ebony Odogaron actually is, but the important aspect here is you can bring the variant of the monster rather than having to slot in the base version just for sake of it being there. And things only got better right after fighting this guy because Shay Wu climbs right to the S+ tier. I did not think that we were going to see another cephalopod, especially one that is so vastly different from the one that we've already seen. Dude, Shay Wu is so cool. His fight as this nimble assassin that turns himself inside out to reveal some eldritch abomination. Peak, literally peak. And oh my goodness, do his weapons look good. Even the lore reason for this guy to exist is so cool. The Guardian monsters are supposed to be the top of the food chain in Wyveria, or at least in the ruins of Wyveria, and this guy says, fuck all that, I'm eating the Guardians. Even the interaction between Shay Wu and the locals is so unique because the locals wear clothes that resemble and I think even smell like Guardians so that the Guardians leave them alone. But in retrospect, that also means that you guys are dressing up as Shay Wu's favorite snack. This guy just checks everything in my list. Cool design, cool armor, cool weapons, cool lore, cool everything. He is just awesome. And with all that being said, Zoshia is still cooler in my eyes. It climbs all the way to the top of the list. Which is interesting because I'm not usually biased towards the big bad Elder Dragon final boss of the story. Xeno'jiiva didn't do it for me. Narwa and Ibushi didn't do it for me. Geismagorm didn't do it for me. In fact, I think the last time I saw a monster that was the final monster of the game's story be so cool was with Altura. The fight is super fun, especially after the high rank version was released. It is so damn fun to fight this guy. And seeing him shift from this angelic looking creature to the literal demon is just so awesome. Although I will say I much prefer him when he has this crystallized version, because even when you crack the armor and like stuff in like the head, you can see this void black hole where the eye is supposed to be. And there's no sugarcoating it. His weapons and even his armor are like the coolest thing in the entire game. I just think it is so peak. And then you have the lore on this monster, which is not just the icing on the cake, it's a whole second cake by itself. Zoshia is a man-made elder dragon that is supposed to be as strong as the black dragons such as Fatalis. In fact, a lot of his moveset, as you guys already know, derives from the 3 variations of Fatalis, with the flame breath coming from regular Fatalis, the bouncing fireballs coming from Crimson, and then you got the red lightning coming from white Fatalis. And much like Fatalis managed to destroy the entire kingdom of Shrade in one night, Zoshia managed to destroy the entirety of Wyveria. Add the fact that this guy can regenerate from essentially like a fingernail that was left behind, this guy is a menace. The only issue I had was that this guy didn't have a high rank fight when the game originally released. That's already been fixed by Title Update 1, so yeah, no complaints. I love this monster. But high rank doesn't seem to fix everything. game because Yun Kut-Ku is C tier for me. I love the cutscene of you and Alma basically talking over the Woodwoods, talking about, you know, capturing one of these guys, but Yun Kut-Ku just doesn't do it for me. It is funny to fight them in groups, but dude, I'm not gonna lie, Great Macau or Great Jaggy could have done a better job in my opinion. Yun Kut-Ku is a goofy little chicken, but we already have a cool goofy little chicken, so I don't see a need to add someone who can't measure up. And on the same vein, then you have Gypceros, which is the last monster I would add as a returning monster. I do not think that neither Yun Kut-Ku or Gypceros were good additions right in the beginning of high rank. If you're someone who's fought them in previous older generations, I appreciate the fight there a lot more, although this does tie into the difficulty of Wilds a little bit with the focus system and the wound system. We saw this happen with some returning monsters in Rise, where the Hunter's power creep was just too much for a returning monster like this to keep up. Ultimately, I just think that there would have been better picks such as Nibblesnarf, even Cephadrome, or my beloved Plesioth. Then you have Rathian and Rathalos, and I'm gonna rank them exactly where I would put them in any other game, which is the top of A rank. Is it really a Monster Hunter game if you don't get to hunt these two side by side again? I am a little bit more understanding towards Rathian than Rathalos because Guardian Rathalos is already a better version of Rathalos. It feels like they only added base Rathalos so that it can follow Rathian around in maps like the Oil Well Basin, because it does feel like whenever you engage a Rathian and the Rathalos is on the map, it will come to her aid. But I would have just left Rathalos in his Guardian state and brought back a monster like Monoblos for the Windward Plains. There's not much else to say. I'm not really impressed or unimpressed at the fact that these guys have returned, but I will say that if they do bring back some variants, Golden and Silver are still welcome for me, but let's try something a little bit more creative this time around, because we just had them in Sunbreak. Then B tier also has a new higher tier monster, which is gonna be Blungonga. I like the big monkey fight, I like the big swing that he does when he punches you, but ultimately, he wasn't the monster that I was looking forward to hunting in that area. Not really his fault. I mean, how are you gonna compare to the monsters that are in the Ice Shard Cliffs, like, you know, Jin the Hod and Gormagala? Much like everything else that was introduced when high rank rolled around in Wilds, it feels like he's just there to occupy the space and make it make sense, which is fine. We've already got plenty of bangers, and I'm not gonna complain if we see a couple of familiar faces here and there, although, again, wouldn't have been my first pick. Like, I personally would have preferred to see something like Zamtrios, because we saw Zamites in Rise, but we didn't see Zamtrios there, so I was hoping to see him in Wilds, but, you know, he's not there. But yeah, Blungonga and his little goblins, yeah, they're fine. I like them. They're just not my preference. This one's gonna annoy people, but I'm gonna put Gravios somewhere in the bottom of S rank. I like Gravios. He's a big rock that, you know, shoots lasers, and in Wilds, it just looks so awesome when you block him. I know most people don't like the beginning of the hunt because you have to break the stomach so that you can actually get in some damage, but as someone who plays a lot of Gunlance, this has never really been a problem for me. It's just because Gunlance is a really good matchup against Gravios. But again, this guy just has presence. He looks cool. He's a big boulder with wings, and he can shoot lasers, and when he rolls around, it's like he takes out half the map with him. And Wilds made it so that blocking that laser is not necessarily the best thing to do, but surely it is the coolest thing to do. However, I will say, let's not get too excited and bring Black Gravios back, because he barely changed anything about the monsters, so yeah, let's keep him in the old gen. Following in the steps of Ebony Guardian Odogaron, we have Fulgur Guardian Anjanath. Personally, I think Fulgur is much cooler than base Anjanath, and I think that this Guardian version is far cooler than the one that we have, you know, the base Fulgur Anjanath in Iceborne. It is just nice to see that once again, we don't have to get the base version only to then get something cool and newer. Now, if my memory doesn't fail me, I actually did cart once to him the first time that I was fighting him, because I didn't expect the AoEs to be so big with the Will Crystals. One really cool thing about the Guardian monsters is that they do these AoEs that create the Will Crystals, and then they use an elemental attack of their element to charge up these crystals and make them explode, which is a nice detail, and it does make the fight a smidge more challenging. Then you got Gormagala, who's an easy S+ rank. I mean, it's Gormagala, and I feel like they did the fight even better in this game. I think plenty of you share the same opinion as I do, which is that high star tempered Gormagala was actually the most challenging hunt at the base launch of the game. I think now it's probably Tempered Mizutsune. My main worry with Gore Magala coming back is that we just saw him in Sunbreak, and things in Sunbreak were pretty crazy because he came back at Master Rank. But in my opinion, they made the fight even better, so I'm very thankful to see him back, and well done. I can't wait to see if Shigaru or Chaotic are going to come back and how crazy their fights are going to be. And last but not least is my second favorite monster that was released in Wilds, which is Archveld. Leave it to Capcom to make the flagship monster be the best representation of all of the mechanics that they've implemented in this title. He is a cool fight, and even later in the game when you get a high star tempered Archveld, he is still a decent challenge. They made his gear and weapons look amazing, and they even gave him 2 different versions of his armor and weapons because of the Guardian version. Whereas the Guardian version was a bit more lackluster after playing the whole game, because there it's, you know, a little bit discombobulated, unsure of its role, doesn't really know how to fight too well. The fight is super fun, and I love his unique chain appendages. It makes the skeleton and the fight by extension feel super fresh. And the lore is also really cool. You know, he is a monster that was going extinct, turned into a guardian, but then even as a guardian, his willpower overcame him and he became a regular monster again. And this is an even bigger achievement considering that Nada was being an annoying little shit about him becoming a real monster, so, you know, well done, Archveld. And with that, all of the base Monster Hunter Wilds monsters have been ranked. I intend on making a new one of these with the title update monster, especially with Lagiacrus coming back. We all know that he's going to dominate the tier list. And needless to say, the Master Rank expansion is also going to get its own dedicated video. Let me know in the comments if you disagreed with any of the monsters' placements in this particular list, but that's all I got for you today. Stay safe, and until we meet again.